Our struggle is not against flesh and blood, but against principalities and powers, against the master spirits of this darkness, against the spirit powers of evil on high. If one were to go to a classroom in a primary school and talk about retribution, that is to say that after death there is a comeuppance, and that can be for good or for bad. If one talks explicitly about the bad side, I mean losing one's soul and going to the company of the enemy of the soul, hell, then very quickly one will be reported. If one takes a child to a supermarket and encounters not a teddy bear, but a spook, a sign of ugliness, and let's say satanic horror, one is part of the system. We are invited to honour the ugly in public, but dare one say anything about the ugly in church or in a school, one is not in a politically correct situation. Who done it? I'll tell you who did. The one who hates our soul and wants the innocent, the little ones, and any soul he can find, and anything that works he will use. Now, let's get this straight. A mortal sin kills the divine life in the soul. One of the elements is grey matter, and one of the elements of grey matter is anything to do with purity. I mean, any use of the whole realm of the genital realm in all that one pertains to reproduction, used out of context, is grave. Grave in all its kind. Totius generis sui. The other element that has to be there is full knowledge. Now that is being taken away from people, however, not entirely. And I'll tell you why. The Lord himself has planted his law in our hearts, and we priests know that people come with a niggling conscience. They have been involved in a situation which secretly they know not to be right, and actually they want the truth. They may have been lulled to sleep by an incomplete message somewhere else, but their conscience, believe it or not, is still functioning. Tell me the truth! The other then, the combination of these two is full consent. The saying to the will, act in accordance. And there, we alone, with our Creator, know the degree of full awareness and consciousness. But it can happen, and it does happen, and one can see it happening. I remember in college days, student days in Rome, I was staying in the last period with the American missionaries, the Maryknoll College. It was close to the university. And we would be told stories. Now basically, it's the same thing in different forms, always repeating itself. This battle between the powers of darkness and what wants to save us. And the good rector, who now has gone back to Africa to die there with his people, an American, would come out with things which were interesting. And he said to us one time, it's not the same as out here in Rome, where you've got the holy sacrifice and grace in the air all over the place in great concentration. When you go down to darkest Africa for the first time with the gospel, you've got all hell against you. And the demon does not want to relinquish his hold over what he's had in his possession from time immemorial. You know what I mean, don't you? Witchcraft. The witch doctor has huge power in society down there until the gospel comes. Power to harm, especially. Vengeance and vendetta. And it works! This is what the missionaries are up against, the first wave of evangelization. But console yourself, when they have no other means, God steps in. Power, miracles, providence, multiplication of food, things that are humanly inexplicable, as in the Acts of the Apostles, as in the annals of missionaries right through the centuries. In the monastery I had to work for years actually on the martyrology. It was what was read every day in chapter, the saints of the day. And many were martyrs on the missions. The first wave, especially in the French realm, they went by the thousand from France, generously, and were tortured quite often. If you don't believe me, go to nearby Dalvin, it's in this parish. Go into the little oratory that's there, look at the back wall, it's full of pictures of martyrs, people who were tortured terribly. The Irish were generous too. This was the real mission work. And I remember the stories he came out with. He knew there was stuff going on in the place he was evangelizing. People kept on a little bit of the other side, just to be sure. Fetishes, a bit of what they were used to. Now, there's something going on in this village. Let's see who's behind it. One after the other, he got them to swear on the Gospels. There was nothing going on. They all came. This lady came along, and he had a suspicion. Come along, my lady, I know that there's no danger whatsoever. You're helping with the church, or you're involved with the church life. Nevertheless, I'd like you to put your hand on the gospel and swear you had nothing to do with this business. She couldn't, there was a power there. One of our brethren from the monastery went down to the Côte d'Ivoire, French-speaking Africa, Ivory Coast, and wrote back to us one time and said, he was celebrating benediction, church was full. And as he elevated the host in the monstrance to give benediction over the whole parish, a lady before everyone levitated, was suspended in the air before the presence, which was too strong for Satan, and was catapulted against the wall. Witchcraft. The devil could not face the power of the Blessed Sacrament. But the rector went on to say all kinds of things that were consoling. One time he said to us in a homily, we priests do not know the power that we hold in our hand. He said casually, one time a lady came to me with her dying son, a little baby, no hope whatsoever. Medicine is what it is down there. One last blessing, Father, before he goes. And succinctly he added, now that boy is a healthy young man. Give us to understand the power of the blessing of the priest is the healing power of Jesus Christ, unchanged. When human means are lacking, this comes in. Multiplication of food and even clothing. Francis Hogan was down in one of the African countries one time and was admiring what was going on. They come very early in the morning for the first celebration, crack of dawn, walking barefoot for kilometres to get there. It lasted a couple of hours. And they all put what they had brought with them into a huge pot and heated it, and each had something to eat. But she was looking at this. This is bizarre. Only a small bit went in. But what's coming out? There's far more coming out than went in. She stayed. And there was another celebration, and I think another again. And the same thing happened each time. There was no way. And at the end of the day, when the huge multitude had been fed, it stopped. She went to the parish priest and said, Father, I noticed what happened there. I was looking and calculating. There was no way that that came out of the pot from what went in there. My good sister, said the good parish priest, well used to it. Is it surprising to you the one who gives us the bread of life is able also to multiply the daily bread? It happened regularly. And I saw it too happening in France. The charismatic renewal out there. Multiplication of food when there was no other means. And I talked to a friend who had it happening also in her hands in the Spanish Harlem. And she calculated, it is happening. This is multiplication of food in my hands. Our God is unchanged. But the other side too is real, my friends. The difference is this. He answers immediately to anyone who gives a little bit of their soul to him. And he answers in a big way to go all the way into everything. Magic. A magician, a magus, has real power. A conjurer knows how to do tricks. Don Bosco learned how to conjure. But a magus, a magician, has power from someone else. You know that also power and glory and success and wealth can be got by that shortcut. Look at history. Where did some of the great ones of history, get their power from? The death of Hitler wasn't nice. You know that the daughter of Joseph Stalin gave testimony. She was present when her father died. It happened in the kind of villa he had in a secluded spot, and he didn't want doctors too near him. He was afraid of getting poisoned. So, what happened? She was actually there. He woke up from a kind of coma, opened his eyes, this is true, and she told people who wanted to know he had a horrible death. Apparently, on opening his eyes, he was looking somewhere, and he started to point his fist. What was he seeing? Where was he going? Power. The founder of the Church of Satan, Anton LaVey, he had a strange death in America. Somebody was present. And the death of a Satanist is a glorious event. They're going to the one they've served, to his kingdom. He too opened his eyes just before passing the frontier, from which no traveller returns. And his changed look betrayed that he was seeing something. And he said, "Oh my, there's something wrong. There's something terribly, terribly wrong." And he died. This, my friends, is the force that's out there and is being celebrated at Halloween. The eve of all the saints, All Hallows, the even of all the saints. Evening, eve, the old English word, recuperated by the dark side. My friends, there's a big difference between reading the martyrology, the saints of the day, each with one thing in common, going straight over the frontier into the arms that saved us and made us, and that of these who go, knowingly or unknowingly, into the dark. All that Satan wants is as many souls as he can get into his kingdom. And now, my friends, he wants also the souls of the former Christian lands. Paganism returning! What would Patrick say if he saw these new snakes that now have returned from the land where he had expelled them? And we sit back and don't do a thing. My friends, these days are dark, and moreover, they're darker than we think. Just finish with this. Some years ago, a holy soul died, but not before being shown something. She was given a glimpse of the beyond. And it was for this reason. The Lord wanted her to warn. If people only knew what was waiting for them, they would not live as they live this short time that we call life. Apparently, an exorcist had this to say. One thing that had come out in his experience was this, that the souls who didn't make it, if they had one thing they could get